Ukraine is losing heavily under the poor leadership of its comedian president Volodymyr Zelensky, who believes photoshoots and propaganda documentaries can deceive the world. But as the world is beginning to walk towards a path of political neutrality and has started realizing that banning Russian athletes was unjust, Zelensky is back with his classic tactic of blaming everyone but himself. Hello and welcome to TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of TFI Media Group. I am your host Ananya Sharma. Let's begin. The Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has criticized the notion of political neutrality in the field of sports, emphasizing that Russian athletes should be banned from participating in the 2024 Olympics. He stated their presence in sporting events would mean that the world has accepted Russia's occupation of his country. His remarks came in the wake of the Olympic Council of Asia suggesting that Russian and Belarusian athletes should be allowed to participate in the Games. Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine would boycott the 2024 Olympics if Russian and Belarusian athletes take part in it. Zelensky further insinuated that while Ukraine's athletes are fighting and dying in war, the Russian ones are left unscarred. Zelensky's claims are quite irrational, untruthful, and far from reality, as in the immediate aftermath of Russia's military operation in Ukraine, the entire bodies, institutions, and organizations which govern sports banned Russian athletes and sportspersons from competing in the Games. While the entire Western mainstream media was circulating false propaganda against Russia and vilifying Vladimir Putin, Russian athletes and sportspersons became targets of the onslaughts of heavily prejudiced Western-dominated sports bodies and institutions. At the very start of the war, Russian athletes and officials were banned from competing at Birmingham 2022 World Games. Continuing the atrocity on Russian athletes, the FIS ban was extended in October, with the skiing's governing body announcing that Russian athletes will continue to be banned from its competitions. Similarly, FIFA and UEFA banned all Russian teams, whether national representative teams or club teams, from taking part in FIFA and UEFA competitions. Even Formula One could not help itself from falling into the political trap laid by the West. Formula One joined other sporting organizations in promoting the nefarious agenda of the US and Europe by announcing that it will no longer race in Russia following termination of its contract with promoter of the Russian Grand Prix. But the bias against Moscow could not have been more blatant than what occurred during the Australian Open. The Russian flag was banned from the Melbourne Park precinct during the game following a complaint from Ukraine's ambassador to Australia. It's unfortunate that Zelensky is trying to mislead the world into believing that it is the Ukrainian athletes who are being discriminated against. The shameless display of political prejudice exhibited by sporting organizations and bodies while introducing bans on Russian athletes is part of a wider strategy to destroy and ostracize Moscow. Zelensky criticized the concept of neutrality, despite it being one of the most fundamental and important principles of sports, because he realizes that in a neutral world, the realities of the Ukrainian military's brutalities would expose the systematic falsehoods and clandestine narratives of the US and Europe. Zelensky has no right to be decrying discrimination when the Russian athletes are being unfairly banned and discriminated against. But fortunately, bodies like the Olympic Council of Asia are realizing that politics, and that too misleading politics, has no place in sports.